There were a couple of curveballs thrown, one of which is the fact that I believed that I was here as the second string replacement. As the second string replacement, typically what you do is you come in off the bench, and Steve can tell you this, you come in off the bench, you bust your tail, and you can't do anything wrong because the coach didn't expect much or you wouldn't be on second string. So that was kind of my hope. Yeah. Mr. Gill, I want you to know that anytime I hear someone talking about the value of public education and they become emotional about that, that enhances my appreciation greatly, sir. This is serious business. This is life-changing business. And that dialogue is coming from one who came from the other side of the tracks. One who is a first-generation college attender. One who, if he would have been tracked, my tract would have had me in a ditch today digging. The reason I'm not in a ditch today digging is because there were teachers, much like you, who saw much more in me than I saw in myself. And they encouraged that, they taught that, they facilitated that, and they made a young man grow. And you guys do that every single day. Our dialogue today is about change. What I want you to understand is that those of you who are relatively young in the room, and from my perspective, that's almost everyone, those of you who are relatively young in the room, you're seeing a time of change in the state, and you think, this is crazy, this is atypical, how will we ever deal with that? Folks in the past never dealt with change like we do today. Part of that's true. In the past, we haven't dealt with the speed of change that we're dealing with today. We haven't dealt perhaps with the high stakes associated with change that we deal with today. But change is nothing new. Change is an essential part of what we are as people, and it's an essential part of what makes us great as people as we work together. I got to make sure these three are taking notes and not working on their presentation for this afternoon. So I'll be up here way too much. When I think about change, and I'm just going to give you a couple of things that I want you to take with you and understand. When I think about change, I think about the work of Michael Fullan, F-U-L-L-A-N. I'm first and foremost a school teacher. So I will be inclined to do school teacherish things rather than Keynote things. I'm not going to stand up there behind a lectern and read my prepared notes. Instead, I'm going to call you down for texting instead of listening to me. That's what I do. That's who I am. That's what folks like you made me. So when I think about Fullan's change, Fullan proposes a model of change that we need to better understand. He proposes some ideas associated with change, and those ideas that we associate with change are a lot like the graphic that I have up here. Because I'm sure when most of you think about change, you think about that placid, tranquil lake. You think about relaxation. You think about something that makes you comfortable and warm. Lady right there is saying, are you stinking nuts? We're not talking about the same change. That's not what I think about when I think about change. That's what I think about when I think about change. And that tornado's coming at me. You know, at times, we get a little caught up in the idea of being a victim of change rather than controlling what change will help us become and help our communities and schools to become. A few of you in this room right now are thinking, I'm a school teacher. Why are you talking about change and leadership? I can tell you why I'm talking about change and leadership to those of you who teach school. What grade do you teach? Thanks, you killed me. You killed me. What grade do you teach? You substitute. So this has nothing to do with you, right? Yes, it has something to do with you, absolutely. When we think about your role in a classroom, there is no more essential change leader in a school than those of you who are in the classroom. And Mr. Substitute, when you're in 17 different classrooms in the course of a quarter, you've impacted more kids than many others. The most essential leadership that takes place in public schools in the state of Tennessee, low in any state, is the leadership that takes place and that is facilitated by you as classroom teachers. And your response to change gives those under your supervision an idea of how they should respond to change in their lives. What that means is, on that first Tuesday in May, when we've got a little red-headed third grade boy who doesn't know a percentage from a persimmon, and we've got that teacher in front of the class who's terribly concerned about their 15 to 25%, folks, your moral purpose has nothing to do with a TCAP assessment. Your moral purpose has nothing to do with the TCAP assessment. When I think about the reason that I'm such a fan of Michael Fullen and his work, I go back to his definition and his discussion of moral purpose. Fullen talks about the importance of everything that we do with change and the fact that it needs to be undergirded by a moral purpose. By doing the right thing and doing those right things the right way. That's to say this, on that first Tuesday in May, it's a whole lot more important that that little red-headed third grader understand that his teacher is modeling life lessons for him. That's critical. I want you to leave with an understanding that your work is much more essential and much more critical than anything that happens on that first Tuesday in May. When Mr. Gill referenced the fact that his grandmother had an opportunity to meet 50-year-olds and know where they are 30 years after being in class, I'm one of those who was teaching 30 plus years ago. And I can tell you about many of those kids that I taught my first year. Everyone in this room who has the same level of experience can tell you the same thing. They can tell you about kids who absolutely changed their lives. The reason they can do that is not a function of how well they did on their AP exam. It's a function instead of seeing a real value in a child and creating a very real relationship that's based on that moral interchange. The fact that this is bigger than what I do. And I'm going to fly through this. And I'm really not a note reader, so that's not where I'm going to be. I'm going to dialogue a lot more. as a classroom-level leader, I want you to get, and I want you to embrace the fact that if everything that you're doing doesn't relate back to what you believe to be important and what you believe to align with your moral purpose, you're putting your time. You're probably just checking off a list for the central office or a principal. Relate the essence of your work to the long-term value of what you're going to provide for your kids. Fulton proposes this diagram that I really, and I want you to, and I'm going to post this up, JC, so you're going to have an opportunity to look at it. He proposes that when we talk about a leadership framework, we have within our framework a moral purpose, an understanding of change, folks who are intent on building relationships, coherence making what we do make sense to all the stakeholders, and creating and sharing knowledge. When we have that framework available, that framework is typically bounded by enthusiasm, by energy, and by hope. So if we think about what we do, no matter the interchange, if we have a level of enthusiasm and energy and hope, and we're about a moral purpose and understanding change and building relationships and sharing and creating knowledge, and we're committed to that, we stay with that, then we're going to have more bad things happen, more good things happen and fewer bad things happen. As I've said, I've been an educator for more than 30 years. Been in Tennessee in my current position for the last 18 years. So if I think about what's presented here, especially this level of commitment, and I think about where we are in the state of Tennessee, it's very obvious to me that in the state of Tennessee, I can quickly identify what the most important initiative has been in the last 18 years. Everybody else can do that, right? So the most important initiative in Tennessee in the last 18 years is hope? No. Put an X through that. It's not hope. The most important initiative in the last 18 years is lower gas prices. I agree with that, but that's not one of our standards. In fact, that's not even one of the SPIs that was thrown out. The most important initiative in Tennessee in the last 18 years is? No, there's one. There's one. There's one that when I started here 18 years ago, I knew that I had to comply with that and I had to do that, and I still have to do it today. Everybody ready? Got to lean in. Oh, come on, we got to lean in. The most important initiative in the state of Tennessee for the last 18 years is this. Ready to write it down? Bloodborne pathogens. Right? Oh, bloodborne pathogens. We all know that. Have you done anything else every year? Anybody? We attach importance to what we do consistently. The most important thing that we do in public education in the state of Tennessee for the last 20 years is we know we put on gloves and we clean up with Clorox. We know about bloodborne pathogens. The reason that most of us sit there and don't pay a lick of attention or are on Facebook is because we don't buy into that. That's not our moral purpose. That's not consistent with what we think is important. But our structural habit as a state has said, you got to do this to comply. So while we talked about Race to the Top, while we talked about No Child Left Behind, while we talked about RTI squared, while we talked about all those things, we know that they're really secondary to bloodborne pathogens. because we're pretty confident the rest of those things are going to cycle out. But bloodborne pathogens is going to hang on, folks. Let's see if we can develop a little bit of understanding what the change process is. And I really wish, do we have anybody from the State Department here? Great, Christy, it's good to see you. As the state, yeah, Christy didn't want to raise her hand at all. She said, why do you do that? Are you killing me? When we think about understanding the change process, it doesn't matter if you're at the State Department level or at the school level. Your goal is not about providing the most innovation. If you are proposing an instructional plan for your 4th grade class, and the essence of your proposal is to provide more innovation for our kids, you lost it. Because it needs to be about the outcome. And it needs to be about that undergirding moral purpose that's important. It's not enough just to have great ideas. One has to work to execute those ideas. And those folks on the Hill and those folks in the community today who believe that teachers are reluctant to work, obviously aren't here on June 14th where we've got folks, while somewhat entertained, they'd rather have a life of their own. But you guys are invested. You're willing to work, you're willing to invest to make that happen. So it's not enough just to have best ideas, you've got to back that up with work. In each of our classrooms, in each of our schools, in fact in our state, we have to understand that there is viability of an implementation deal. When I work out a lot, and that doesn't happen enough, but when I work out a lot, it's reasonable for me to believe that I will provide the treatment, that I will do the lifting, and the next day, I'm sore. And I'm not as strong as I was before that lift. I can't run as fast as I did before that workout. Why? Because I've changed my protocol, and there's a dip that takes place. I'm using some different muscles. So I'm not as limber as I was the day before. If we start teaching what we're teaching at West Middle School in 8th grade in our language arts class, and we do everything different, Stephanie would be nuts to believe that no, that wasn't you. That was, okay. I started to think she really is nuts. She would be nuts to believe that she would have the same level of effectiveness today that she enjoyed last week with a different approach. You've got to appreciate the fact that when you change, everything changes. And the most important thing that you change is the culture. The most important thing that you will establish in your class. Harry Wong will talk about procedures, but he talks about procedures to establish a culture. So when you think about change, think, folks, about culture, and cultures don't happen in a day. Cultures for many of us happen in a lifetime. Think about that long-term investment that you're making. And understand that the change process is not about preparing a rubric. It's not about preparing a checklist and checking it off. I changed this, I changed this, I changed this, I changed this. So we've accomplished change. It's not a checklist, it's changing a culture. What you see from Fullen's discussion is an idea that suggests, wait a minute, change is not as instant as perhaps I once thought it was. Let's see if we can apply what we do and what we've talked about here to where you are. And if there are 4 key questions that I'd like for you to deal with, those questions are on the board. What do you want to accomplish in your school or classroom? Whether it's a young man here who just finished his program, he's student teaching right now, or gentleman here who you didn't start this year, been here a couple of years. So a gentleman who has a few more years of experience, I can assure you this, folks, neither of those gentlemen decided, I really want to be a teacher because I'm excited about those accountability measures and TCAP scores. Nah, you want to be teachers because you can change lives. You want to be teachers because you thought you could make some great things happen for people. You want to be teachers because you believe that you can change the future. And you're right. So to that end, what are your guiding principles? What makes you work every day? And by principles, we're not talking P-A-L-S, we are talking P-L-E-S. What you do when your door is closed. The teacher you really are. The rubric-free teacher. Can you articulate your moral purpose? You know what it is, but can you articulate it? And more importantly, after you've had those kids for a year, after you have served as a principal with a teacher for 5 years, can they identify what your moral purpose is as a leader? Because it's real easy for me to be an evangelist here, to talk about what we're doing and what's important and why this is so critical, but I got to go home and live it. I got to go home and have my employees be able to answer that question as to Dan Lawson's moral purpose is this, and this is how I see him. This is how he behaves. Let me give you a second book that will create for you a pretty good understanding of moral purpose, at least as I gauge that. That book is called Courageous Leadership, and that book is by a pastor in Illinois by the name of Bill Hybels, H-Y-B-E-L-S. When Bill Hybels talks about moral purpose, he doesn't use those terms, but he related his hiring to what he thought was important. Folks, I'm going to submit to you that while you don't select the kids that come into your class, I would love to see you implement Hybels' beliefs in terms of the outcome that's produced. Because I think you're going to find a real value and a real step back from something as trivial as a test score to something that's really important, and that's development. So when Hybels talks about moral purpose, while he doesn't use those terms, here's what Hybels talks about. When I gauge my effectiveness as a leader, and when I gauge your effectiveness as a leader in Sullivan County, the first thing I want to know is, does your intervention, does the treatment that you provide, does the time that you spend with your kids help in the development of their character? Folks, I don't think there's anything more important than character development. Because the investment that we make in our professional staff help in development of their character. second question I ask, or the second question I answer is answered by this way. Does the work that we do assist in development of their competence? When we're talking about competency, we're talking about the idea that we're going to have 4 or 5 on that AP. We're going to be proficient, or we're going to move from below basic to basic. But more importantly, we're going to apply what we do and what we're investing in terms of that subject area. By the way, I became a superintendent with no intent of ever being an educator. Became a teacher with no intent of ever being an educator. It was a fortuitous detour in my life. It was just going to be a stopping spot for a year or so. But as I made that stop, I knew that I had a set of skills that I acquired that I thought could probably help me in school leadership positions. So while we might have some concerns about the application of our subject matter to somebody's vocational or career choice, don't get confused. The most important experience that I had academically to prepare me for the superintendency didn't take place in college, it took place in high school. And it involved me wearing a blue corduroy jacket. And that blue corduroy jacket had a ear horn on it and an FFA logo. And that blue corduroy jacket said that I had worked with something called public speaking. So that was a part of what I did. I developed an understanding of something that I thought I would never use as a 15-year-old, and that's parliamentary procedure. When the heck would I ever use that? About my first board meeting. While I had no interest in accounting, I had a BOAG teacher who called that record keeping, which provided for me a rudimentary understanding of keeping books for a multi-million-dollar organization. Wilbur Amos was confident that I would never be a superintendent of schools. I can assure you that. But he provided me a skill set that was portable and a skill set that was transferable that allowed me to open some doors. Today, you are providing skill sets that are portable and transferable that you don't know about. Because I can tell you right now, the 2 classes in high school that best prepared me for my work, vocational agriculture and singing in the choir. What about that? Because when you sing in the choir, it really doesn't bother you to get up and perform a little bit. You guys should have sung in the choir. You wouldn't have been so anxious about this afternoon. Okay, I got strokes from the Aggies, I got strokes from the fine arts folks. Let me see if I can get 4 people back in. If I look at the third question, that third question becomes this. When I'm putting someone in the mix, whether that someone is a principal or a fellow teacher or a student working in a group, my question becomes, does the presence of that student, of that principal, of that teacher make the entire group better? Can they work with others? Is their chemistry good? Do they serve as a tool that lifts everyone up? And finally, this work is not always easy, and this work at times will provide us opportunity to irritate folks. It will provide us opportunities to isolate ourselves from others by simply telling the truth consistent with our moral purpose. And folks, when you tell the truth, you have to act with courage. And I hope we are developing, and I hope you are seeing and believing the importance of developing a culture of kids, a culture of leaders who are prepared to act with courage. So here's my charge to you. It's really simple, and it's really important. And I may get in trouble with Christy. I would submit to you that those 4 questions are a heck of a lot more important than watching the bloodborne pathogen film. May not have the continuity, but I would submit to you that it's a heck of a lot more important that we focus on developing leaders and we focus on being leaders who work to develop people of character, who work to develop young people who are competent in their work, who work to develop young people who work as a catalyst for positive change in terms of their chemistry, and we develop young people who are people of courage. Model that behavior. Because folks, it's more important than anything else that we can do. Model those expectations in a manner that the real assessment that you're worried about next May is the last question I posed. Can my students see what's important to me? And if they can answer that what's important to my teacher is character, competence, chemistry, and courage, then you've had a wonderful year. You've helped to create a wonderful school, classroom, and community, and you will be much more at peace as a professional educator. Thank you very much for all you do. Appreciate your time.